That sounded promising. There we go. Okay. Now can everyone hear me, including OEV TV back there? Great. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming to support. If you were able to go to the rally upstairs, it was really awesome to see that many organizations in one place. Before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to Representative Sayama. Thank you so much for being with us. If you could just stand and say hi to everybody. Yeah, the support of our legislative leaders means a lot to us. Go ahead and get started. My name is Kimmy Ide Foster, and I'm here in my capacity as a director with Hawaii Women Lawyers. I am also a director with the Planned Parenthood National Affiliate, Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates. So before we jump into the panel, I do want to give you guys just a little bit of the legal history of how we got to where we are. We are going to start off with this because this panel is not meant to be a legal panel. It's meant to be an intersectional discussion because this affects all of us. It affects all of us no matter what you're doing, where you are, or who you are. So, now that I've said that, back to the legal stuff. So in the 1950s and 60s, abortion was illegal in almost all states. However, a pair of high-profile crises, being the morning sickness drug thalidomide and an epidemic of rubella that swept the country thereafter, forced a national spotlight on the issue. If you're not familiar with it, thalidomide caused thousands of birth defects, and babies that survived rubella in utero were often born with a wide range of severe health conditions, such as deafness, heart defects, and liver damage. In this environment, high-profile doctors began to argue publicly that abortion should be treated like other medical procedures, a decision to be made between physician and patient. Groundbreaking, I know. While thalidomide and rubella impacted public perspectives on abortion, a series of cases began to wend their way through courts, building the foundation for a coming revolution in abortion law. I won't go through all of them because no one here signed up for a constitutional law class, but I do want to touch on at least the original premise of Roe, which was the right to privacy. The 1965 case of Griswold v. Connecticut struck down a Connecticut law that barred not only contraceptives, but also the distribution of information relating to them. The ruling explained that the Bill of Rights implied a right to privacy and ultimately held the government cannot prevent married couples from accessing contraception. Single people were SOL, but it was a start. Griswold's contention that the Constitution creates a zone of privacy into which the government cannot enter paved the way for Roe. Fast forwarding to 1973, in Roe v. Wade, 7 of the 9 justices agreed that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which states that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, implied a right to privacy. The majority cited a series of cases indicating that the term liberty must be interpreted broadly in a free society. The justices did, however, recognize that the state could place some limits on abortion if necessary to further a compelling state interest and the state's ability to regulate increase as the pregnancy progressed. After a fetus reached viability, that state could prohibit abortion, except when necessary to protect health or life. Roe gave us what many of us recognize as the trimester measurements. Now, to give some context, Roe significantly reduced maternal mortality. In 1965, 8 years preceding Roe, illegal abortion caused at least 17% of pregnancy-related deaths, and that was only the reported numbers. 2 years after Roe, there were only 3 incidents of such deaths. Now, those numbers are grossly undercounted for a variety of reasons, racial divisions, class and wealth inequities, and whatnot. But they do illustrate that Roe saved lives. For the following 49 years, states, healthcare providers, and citizens fought over what limits the government could place on abortion access, particularly during the 2nd and 3rd trimesters. But abortion was fundamentally legal in all 50 states during that period. Cases like Planned Parenthood of Southern Pennsylvania versus Casey in 1992 began chipping away at the protections of Roe by replacing the trimester doctrine with weaker protections and upheld elements of laws that did not unduly burden the right to abortion. Fast forward again to 2022, and we meet Dobbs. In Dobbs, Justice Samuel Alito argued that the right to privacy is not specifically guaranteed anywhere in the Constitution. He stated that when unenumerated liberty rights exist, those rights must be, quote, deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition, end quote. Reviewing the history of abortion restrictions in the very early United States and, inexplicably in my view, the pre-constitutional common law history of England, we're talking like 13th century, Alito concluded that the right to abortion is not such a deeply rooted tradition. which brings us to today. Roe has fallen. Abortion has gone back to the states. And we have watched state after state after state go dark, leaving millions of women without choice, rights, or hope. While Hawaii is blessed in that we have had a long existing commitment to protecting reproductive rights, it is not enough, which is why this extraordinary group of people here today and in this room are doubling down on strengthening our rights to protection and access. By way of a quick recap, and I'm almost done talking at you, in 2022, Governor Ige issued an executive order prohibiting officials in Hawaii from cooperating with states attempting to prosecute people who received a procedure legally in Hawaii, which was a huge step for us. And as you may have heard outside, there are some proposed pieces of legislation that we very much want to highlight and encourage you to keep your eye on and support. The first bill is a cleanup bill that relates to abortion care by doctors and APRNs by removing location requirements, updating definitions and terminology, and removing archaic fines and penalty provisions. The second bill is known as the SHIELD Bill. It aims to codify and expand the protections under Governor Ige's executive order for healthcare providers, update licensing chapters for healthcare professionals regarding reproductive healthcare, and provide that Hawaii courts will not apply other states' anti-abortion laws in choice of law situations or enforce out-of-state judgments arising out of penal civil actions relating to reproductive healthcare and services. So please, when it comes time for public testimony, please watch those, please support those. The legislators hold the power now. You need to support them. Now that you have the legal background, I'd like to turn it back to our community leaders. First, we have Angelina Mercado. Angelina is the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She also joins us today in her capacity as the co-chair of the Hawaii Women's Coalition and a member of the Hawaii Abortion Collective. In her nonprofit career, Angelina has worked to address the root causes of poverty and trauma on the lives of women and children, first to volunteer for Wahine Moving Forward, then as Director of Advancement for Hawaii's Children Action Network. Angelina has also previously served on the board of directors of the Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Hawaii and was the Vice President of Communications, then Chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force for the Junior League of Honolulu. Please welcome Angelina. Next on our panel, we have Emma White. Emma is a racial and social justice advocate focusing on women's empowerment, removing barriers to care, and deconstructing colonial hegemonic structures. She has served on the NBA Portland Trail Blazers Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and is a founding member of the Alliance for Racial Justice at Oregon Health and Science University. Currently, Emma is a member of the Hawaii Abortion Collective and serves as the social justice advocate at YWCA Kauai, an organization dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all, specifically in domestic violence and sexual assault spaces. Please welcome Emma. Our third panelist is Kyla Baker. Kyla Baker joins us as a member of Planned Parenthood's Generation Action. If you do not know what that is, I will let Kyla explain it to you. Kyla is born and raised on Oahu and is currently a social work senior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. With over 5 years of policy research experience, she has been interning for Planned Parenthood for the last year. Growing up in Hawaii, Kyla has focused her research on domestic social issues, including human trafficking in Hawaii, Hawaii STI rates, and reproductive health care. Please welcome Kyla. Our fourth speaker is Kim Ku'ule Burney. Kim is the current communications director for Papaʻolalokahi. Papaʻolalokahi is a Native Hawaiian health service provider with healthcare systems on Oahu, Kauai, Molokai, Maui, and Hawaii Island. Prior to taking on her role as communications director, Kim has also served the executive director of the Ahahui o Nā Kauka, the Association of Native Hawaiian Physicians, and has continued to provide consulting support to them for the last 25 years. Kim is a longtime advocate for rights and health of women and also joins us today in her capacity as a member of the Hawaii Abortion Collective. Please welcome Kim. All right, before we really get started, I would like each of you can go whatever order you want, to please share what does access in the context of reproductive health mean to you personally? Go ahead and start. I think it's the one up top.
Perfect. Hi, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So access really, to me, really means reproductive autonomy and protection from other people's ideas about what I can do for my body, and when it comes to the context of my work, really protecting survivors and their right to have even closer, right? Okay, so we'll need to put this closer. Access means reproductive autonomy. I hesitate to use the word choose because it really, many people in our community don't actually have a choice in what they can do, and so many things are imposed on them depending on where they live and how they live and the color of their skin. And so that's something that's really important to me personally, as I think about generations of my family who haven't had that choice, but also as it comes to my work, working with survivors and the things that are imposed upon them through reproductive coercion and their abusive relationships.
That was really well said. So I don't want to reduplicate, but I think access means having full access to your own bodily autonomy and bodily sovereignty. And one piece, a separate piece, is having local access to comprehensive healthcare services, which is something that we are fighting against in our neighbor islands.
I'll try and not kind of repeat some of the answers that have already been given, but the other two couldn't have said it any better. Access is having the right to life, having the right to your own health, and being able to seek the services that you absolutely need for you to prolong your own life and your well-being. And that is something that we're still fighting for and will always be angry about and always encourage others to be passionate about as well.
Thank you. Mahalo to Hawaiʻi Women Lawyers and to all the coordinators of the rally today, and also to this panel. I come from a Hawaiian health organization, but we're also in the larger public health arena. And for us, we're always looking at health care that is accessible, affordable, and even acceptable. And they all go hand in hand. How can we provide an avenue for those who wish to seek out care, health care of any kind, and make it more acceptable to seek out, to get the services that they want. So for us, it's we do look at accessible health care, but how does that go hand in hand with what is affordable, what is available, and what is acceptable? And that is in the case of providers and all the cultural nuances that come with providing such services.
Great, thank you. This question was actually originally for Emma, but I'd actually kind of like to hear from a couple of you. We heard outside that one of the biggest issues facing residents of Hawaii is our sister islands do not have enough resources. They do not have enough access. Can you talk a little bit about that and the challenges facing them and what we can do to make that better? So I'm not sure who wants to start. Emma, why don't you go ahead?
I can start.
Perfect.
So I can't speak for other sister islands, but I can speak about what's been what the landscape looks like on Kauai currently. We actually have developed a local work group with providers, legal professionals, community advocates, and we have identified several things that are barriers to care. The first is going to be travel requirements. For those who don't know, on Kauai there is only access to medication abortion, which is only up until 10 weeks. If you want to receive a in-clinic abortion or you need to receive one, you have to travel off-island. That's a huge barrier for folks who don't have, who have limited or no income, no child care, can't take time off work, and to be able to travel, you often have to have an established PCP. Many people do not have an established PCP, and there are insurance authorizations that have to go through to, allow travel. we've also identified, of course, stigma that, especially in smaller rural communities, that can be a big hurdle for folks to overcome if they are afraid that their neighbor or friend, family member is working in a clinic where they need to receive services. It may be an obstacle for them to go. There's also been a perceived lack of support or guidance, I should say, from hospital and clinic leadership. The larger answer has been like, well, it's legal, but there's not a whole lot of cohesion amongst providers, and they don't really know who does what, and it's a lot of working underground to try and get people access to the services they need. In addition to that, it can be really difficult to get into appointments for rapid pregnancy dating, which again, if you can only get access to medication abortion up to 10 weeks, time is really of the essence. Mm-hmm. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, but I'll pass the...
No, that's fantastic, Emma. Kim, maybe you could speak to that as well. I know that you have clinics on almost all of the islands, except Niihau.
Yeah, and I think that's the value of having networks. You've already mentioned that there is a network of Native Hawaiian physicians that are found on all islands. There's also a network of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community health workers. And I think that those relationships for neighbor island providers and outreach workers to be able to lean on colleagues that are on Oahu or Maui, but we know that most of the services are being provided on Oahu, to be able to entrust their patient or client to somebody on Oahu, and then for the provider on Oahu to feel comfortable that there is some follow-up care for patients or clients that return to their home island is a solution. And I suspect that these networks could certainly be better developed specific to the topic of women's health care and to abortion. But I know that we've got some wonderful physicians who spoke earlier today that have colleagues on all islands. And I think that one of the solutions is in not only developing but executing those referral relationships.
Yeah, we are very, very lucky, especially to have Dr. Soon at the head of this discussion. She has been, I don't think she's in here right now, but she has been unbelievable.
She's a superstar.
She is. Her energy is like bottomless. All of those challenges, they make perfect sense, and I hope that we can work together to kind of address some of them in an order that makes sense. Kyla, I mentioned this in your introduction. Can you share a little bit about what Generation Action is? Because I think for some people in here, that's a new term.
Yeah, absolutely. So Generation Action is a student-led organization on campus at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And what we do is we hold tablings, we volunteer at rallies and other events to promote reproductive rights and abortion access nationwide pretty much. And a lot of what I do at Generation Action is community building with the student body and getting the next generation active in policy work. And so, yeah, it's a great way for students, especially after COVID, to find one another, relate to one another, and fight with one another for reproductive rights. Yeah.
That's great. And yeah, Generation Action has been huge all across the country. They are doing so much. We really appreciate your work. Angelina, if you could share with us a little bit, because I think some people don't recognize that, like I said earlier, this really is an intersectional issue. And what do you feel is the interplay between abortion access and DV, or reproductive health rights in general in DV?
So, first like to point out the health aspect of it. Many people in our community, and not just our community here in Hawaii, but across the world, do not recognize that domestic violence is actually a public health issue that we all need to care about. It affects our communities right now. It affects our public health. It affects future generations of keiki and, the development of social norms. So that's base level. But when it comes to working with survivors of domestic violence, too many people don't know that reproductive coercion is actually a form of intimate partner violence. And especially survivors don't recognize what this is. So when we talk about access and access to reproductive health, contraception, and abortion, if you don't even know that you've been abused, that your partner's withholding of condoms, stealthing, all of these things that happen to people, if you don't even know that that shouldn't happen, that that's actually part of intimate partner violence and you have access to resources, then how could you possibly even get to the point of seeking advocacy help, legal help, and tapping into that system?
Yeah, I think a lot of us don't recognize that that really does play a huge, huge role in that. And like you said, a lot of survivors don't necessarily recognize what they've gone through, in which case we hope that there's going to be a network of other organizations that can help them understand those. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're actually, that was a really big part of being part of the Abortion Collective, is really to make sure that people make that connection between intimate partner violence and how important access to abortion is. And we say the word abortion deliberately because we know that that may be the only option for survivors, and also know that their abusive partner can actually use abortion and reproductive coercion. So we've got to name it in order to do something about it. And so we are, it was a brave thing for us, and we're very fortunate in Hawaii that we have our state constitution, we have our state laws that protect us from doing this. Other state coalitions have had to have deep conversations with their partner agencies about whether they can say this and what impact this is going to have on their federal funding or any other funding that they have in the state. And so we really are working with at the minimum, our member partners, our member programs, to make sure that they have the information they need, they have access, and to the extent that the coalition can do things like amazing things like, wouldn't it be great to have Plan B in the shelter? Other states do it. Right? Mm-hmm. So, it's just like the little things that can make such a big ripple effect impact on survivors in the community.
Yeah, that's great. That's very true. Please do. Yeah, if you guys want to jump in, go right ahead.
So YWCA Kauai is one of the primary providers of domestic violence support and sexual assault services. And I just want to highlight that you do not have to be sexually active to become pregnant and need an abortion, which is shocking to think about. But many people are assaulted and find themselves in a situation where they need to find abortion care. There's this kind of myth that, just don't be sexually active if you don't want to have an abortion. But that is not the story of many victims of sexual assault.
Yeah, that's very true. Bouncing down to Kim, speaking of kind of communities that need help to reaching access and whatnot, marginalized people and people of color have traditionally been one of the most underserved in the country, and they're the ones that are going to be the most heavily impacted by the Dobbs decision. Hawaii we are lucky. We're blessed in that we are much better off than most of the country. We're not all the way. And many challenges do face Native Hawaiians. And so if you could speak to that, Kim, what is the most significant challenges you see facing Native Hawaiians with respect to reproductive health and abortion access?
Sure. I think this goes back to your earlier question about access. Really, the question about access is the answer to so much, is the answer to all of the other questions. Approximately, I believe the last statistic I saw is that 44% of recent abortions over a certain period of time are Native Hawaiian and or Pacific Islander. It's not disaggregated. I don't read it simply because the state didn't disaggregate that information. But one of the tools that would help us to better serve our respective communities is to break out all the data that comes out, and not just, Asian, but how many are Filipino, how many are, come under other Asian ethnicities, to disaggregate Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and to collect all the data that's important, because none of us are, no matter how statistically insignificant we might be labeled, we're all talking about people. We're talking about our family members, our our neighbors, our communities. So data collection and disaggregation and the distribution of such data is really important. I earlier told you that I didn't think I could answer a question about nurse practitioner involvement, and that's simply because I don't have access to the data. So I'm not sure how to answer one of those provider questions. Also, care. I mentioned earlier culturally competent care. That's what that term acceptable care is all about. We have programs such as the state health corps, the loan repayment program, where we grow your own programs, where we take local people who want to go into one of the health professions and we provide them and we say, but you got to come back. Those are the grow your own programs that are so important when it comes to providing health care, especially here in Hawaii, because we all say we tell everybody else over there that we're special, and we are unique. The way we interact, the way we prioritize our relationships, the way the collective is of higher value than individualism here in Hawaii are all important, and it's much easier to take our local folks, and I work specifically with the Native Hawaiians and at different points in time with Pacific Islanders as well, but to take our local folks, we can train them to be doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, outreach workers, and still understand the local culture or the culture of their own community or, their own neighborhood, than it is to bring in health professionals here and try to teach them about our culture, about our history, about the history of trauma and colonialism and all that, and really to understand it and put it into practice. So I think all of that cultural competency, no matter what culture you're talking about, that competency in working, knowing who you're working with, will that acceptable care will then open up better care that's more accessible.
That's great. And yeah, I think to your point, I do want to emphasize the fact that we have talent here. We have talent that can be grown. And it's a heck of a lot easier to bring along somebody that's already used to Hawaii values, entrenched in Hawaii values, than it is to introduce somebody from the mainland, because, no offense to the mainland, nothing wrong with it, but we have such a unique culture. Yeah. And that is a huge, huge part of it. So thank you guys. You've all given kind of a perspective of like how we've gotten here, how things are going. But I want to talk a little bit about the future. And so Kyla, that would be you. How does your generation feel about access in Hawaii, reproductive rights in general? What do you guys see as what we need to do? Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I believe after the Dobbs decision, that definitely shook my generation. It's something that we've always thought would stay around, and I'm sure all of you were hoping for the same, but unfortunately that's not the case right now. But I think it's important for my generation to realize that even though all of this is happening and we're in an access state, that the fight is still continuing, and even though we can't be too comfortable here, you can't be comfortable here. This is something we can't be comfortable with. And that's something I've noticed a lot of my generation is they are awakened, they are called to action, but then there's this plateau. And that's something that is a pet peeve of mine. And it's something I was telling my coworkers in the car on our way here is I'm so bothered by the lack of action that I sometimes see from my generation. And Hawaii is the place that we can get a little too comfortable with that because it is an access state. But we should be a role model. We are setting a precedent for other legislators, other states, other legislations that are yet to be passed. And we are the next generation to lead that. We are the next ones stepping into that role, the next one stepping into office. So we need to stay awake.
Completely agree. And I couldn't have said that better. I mean, I think a lot of us thought Roe was going to be around for forever. That was the law of the land. I mean, even in the Casey decision, they looked at overturning Roe and said, well, we can't do that. There's not a compelling reason. And they also know that Americans had already planned their life around reproductive health and access. Along comes Dobbs, and apparently that just didn't matter. So it's wonderful to hear that the next generation is engaged and that you're ready to go. And to the extent anyone in this room can help you wake them up, I think they'd be happy to. We're going to go down the line with just one more question for each of you, and then we're going to open up to audience questions. Can you share what you see the role of the organization that you're here representing playing in the fight for reproductive access in Hawaii? Let's start with Kim. We'll go this way.
I believe the role of Papu'ololokahi, which is authorized by a federal Native Hawaiian, it's a federal Native Hawaiian healthcare program. The role is to continue to raise the health status of Native Hawaiians and their families, and we already do this through multiple strategies: policy, programs and services, cultural competency. We weave in traditional healing, our healing traditions as well. I think that's one thing that. Well, I think perhaps because the community that we serve and represent is the host community, and so perhaps by reminding and integrating our culture and traditions and customs, which are protected by the state constitution, but also important because they weave in our relationship with the land and how we all get in interact with one another. So I don't remember seeing this question on the list, so I'm talking on the fly. But I think our role as a Hawaiian service provider is to integrate our customs and traditions, to stick to our purpose of raising the health status, because we know that what is good for Hawaiians is good for all the people of Hawaii, and to simply look at those key public health principles that I mentioned earlier today, and that is making sure that health care for those who choose it is self-determined, that there are services and programs that are accessible, that are affordable, that are acceptable, and that are available to all who seek them.
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood. As a college student, Planned Parenthood was always the organization that I would look to, or always recognized as a role in reproductive health care across the nation. A big part of what we kind of give to our community here in Hawaii is hopefully expanding health care. Like was shared earlier during the rally, we only have one other clinic on Maui, and we have providers going every month or two, or once or twice a month, to provide that care to patients on neighbor islands. And Planned Parenthood has definitely paved the way to expanding accessible reproductive health care and abortion care across the state. And a part of that is partnering with other great organizations that are striving to achieve the same goal.
So YWCA Kauai is, as I said, we primarily offer domestic violence and sexual assault survivor services. And where that fits in with, expanding abortion access, it was really well covered by Angie earlier. But reproductive coercion is real, and it often for survivors, their abuser is their only support network by design. So if they're trying to leave this situation that they're in, there needs to be a safe support network to receive the health care that they need outside of that abusive situation. We want to, and we will continue, and we do help those faced with navigating those difficult situations. But as I said, access is not comprehensive on many neighbor islands. And I want to highlight that legal does not necessarily mean accessible. it's very difficult to access these services. And so falling back on the excuse really that, well, it's legal to get an abortion doesn't mean that people are able to get the health care that they need and deserve.
Very, very, very true. Angelina.
So at the Coalition, our mission is to address the social, political, and economic impact of domestic violence on our families and our individuals. And so we do that through our member programs. We have 18 organizations who are our member programs, and they represent 29 actual individual programs like the YWCA of Kauai. So what we really, our work is to do the systems work. Our work is to do the legal work, the lobbying work to ensure that the survivors who are on Maui, Big Island, or Kauai don't have to travel to Oahu to get the care and make the decisions that they want to have for their bodies. Because, to what Emma was saying, they are by design often attached to their abuser, and their abuser could be monitoring them on their social media, keeping them from access to cars, transportation, etc. So that is a huge part of access for folks on the neighbor islands. It is a huge aspect of own personal autonomy as we're working with survivors, and really a big part of our work as well is to make sure that we're uplifting the work of other people in the community, like Papaola Lokahi, like Planned Parenthood Next Generation. It has been reported so many times in various studies that Native Hawaiians and Filipinos outrank our community as survivors of domestic violence. And if our work is not in collaboration with these communities, what does the future for Hawaii looks like? It looks pretty bleak. But the good thing is that we are collaborating, so I think it's stronger, but it could be if we don't.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Okay, we have a bunch of questions from the audience. No, in no particular order, although I think this one I will address because I think it's probably best suited for me. Please discuss what are the specific changes. I'm assuming this is with respect to the new legislation. Is that correct? Okay. In strengthening our need for Hawaii laws to protect our rights, and can I share any bill numbers yet? So the bill numbers have not yet been assigned, but when they are, Hawaii Women Lawyers will likely share a blast to let you know how you can support it, share written testimony. Specific changes are with respect to the cleanup bill. They are going to be removing location requirements, updating definitions or terminology, and they are working to remove the $1,000 fine and 5 year in prison provisions. I'm so sorry. You know what? Let me ask Mihoko about this. So that's the SHIELD bill. So that'll be the SHIELD bill, which will be the one that will codify a significant amount of, I believe, Governor Ige's. Senate Bill 1. Is that right? Yes. Great. And like I said, I think we will probably be sharing with our membership what we've supported and encourage you to write in for testimony.
Can I add a little?
Please do.
So there's also a bill right now that is meant to create an abortion access coordinator statewide. And the bill is still in the drafting phase, so there's no bill number yet. But one way to improve access is to have this centralized source of information. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, providers don't know who's doing what, and if providers don't know, definitely individuals who are seeking care don't know where to go. Right now we have the Hawaii Abortion Collective's abortion guide at hawaiiabortioncollective.com. But by supporting this bill to create a centralized point of contact is going to give people across the islands access to information for their own health care.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to do a combination of these two questions because they are somewhat related. Let's hear from all of you, actually, just very briefly, because we are running up on the time, but I would like to get your thoughts because I think this is an intersectional question. How do we reduce stigma in the community around abortion access? And how do we work to change our sexual education in schools and normalize conversations about this and include men and boys in the conversation, because this is still a woman-dominated issue. They do not understand it affects all of you. So let's start on this side. Angelina, very briefly, please.
So I don't have the bill number, but Erin's law is making its way around the legislature for like the 20th time. And can we just make it be the last time? So what Erin's law does is ensure that there is sexual abuse education in grades K through 12. I think we need to stop acting like these things don't happen in our community, and we really need to say this out loud. There are not a lot of ways, they're not, let me take a step back. It happens in our communities, and it looks different, and the words for it are different in our communities. Not every community has a word for abortion. We have learned this when we were doing our translation work for our own documents, and we made sure to work with our community partners because intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, words like that don't translate. But we definitely need to be in the community and working with them and understanding what it looks like for them to then be able to address it. And I think that one of the ways to destigmatize is by also laying fault and blame on a particular community or group about how they do or do not address things like sex assault, sex abuse, intimate partner violence. Because if you have so many generations that keep looking at this and dealing with this over and over again, and it is the norm for them, it will be resisted. I know that. I've seen that in my own Puerto Rican community, in my own family on the island of Puerto Rico.
Thank you. Emma.
Well, I think one of the most important things to hopefully remove stigma completely, but over time decrease it, is to use the word abortion. It's really easy to water it down and say reproductive health, but it maintains this stigma that abortion is something that should be spoken about quietly. It's something that's shameful, and it's not. So I think, first of all, using the word abortion, talking about abortion with friends, family. There are ways to share your story anonymously. I believe Planned Parenthood has a project on that. And then I also want to say that please support Erin's Law. It's something that we at YWC Kauai already have an existing program called Prevention Education. But it's about teaching kids K through university age about bodily autonomy, bodily sovereignty, what a safe relationship looks like, and what it doesn't look like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that hard conversations are good conversations, and that's something that this entire topic is. Like it was shared before, abortion is a word that is heavily stigmatized. Yet here we are proactively trying to utilize abortion or the term abortion regularly, because that is the first step to destigmatizing it. But yeah, we need to feel uncomfortable when having these conversations, because that is the immediate sign and recognition that something needs to be done. Something is wrong, and we need to find a solution for it.
I completely agree with we've got to reduce the fault and blame in particular, and whether that's done through K through 12 education or whether that's done, I think that our partnerships and our relationships, we might work in our neighborhoods or in our families, but I also think that it would be useful to have those difficult conversations with faith communities too, because, period. I think it would be very useful to tap into our faith-based community too for education. to really work on reducing the stigma, so that when there is a need for abortion, or when somebody has gotten an abortion, that they feel supported by their family, by their community, by whatever part of community they are. But I think that's 100% on that bit, and everything else they said I agree with.
Sure.
And I forgot to mention, when we talk about gender, we really need to have some conversations about gender and gender identity and fluidity and, let's say it, the patriarchy and what all that looks like, and its impact on people who identify as little boys, and the things that they start to think about and develop as ideology early on about how they can or cannot respond to things. And there needs to be an entire community accountability despite how you identify as a gender. It cannot just be that women are ultimately responsible and then stigmatized, harmed, threatened, and the people in the community who are there to try to help them, our lives are threatened, livelihoods are threatened because other people just have really strong opinions about that. We as a community need to own all of this. We need to own all gender, and we need to stop breaking down those stereotypes of what gender looks like and who's accountable for what.
Very, very, very true. I do want to give one quick update going back to Senate Bill 1. Apparently it is being filed today. Thank you to Liz Fujiwara, who I think is watching online. She is a fellow committee member and director with Hawaiʻi Women Lawyers, and in her own right and capacity does a lot of work with the legislature. She's an incredible person. So thank you, Liz, if you're online. Okay, I think we're running out of time, but do we have time for one more question? No, okay, we are out of time. I am so sorry, guys. But thank you, guys. Can everyone please join me in thanking our panel? You guys are awesome. All right. I think that calls it. Thank you.